of the marginalized, the struggles of the common man, and the complex beauty of human emotion. With poetic imagery and unflinching realism, he championed the cause of middle cinema, a bridge between art and accessibility.
Cinematography of his films is something you can really marvel about. So not just these films are wonderful experiences in terms of stories, but also they are beautiful visual experiences as well.
Tapan Sinha's work reminds us that cinema can both move hearts and provoke thoughts. A true testament to his genius, his films continue to challenge norms, exploring the complexities of human nature with profound empathy and striking realism, leaving an indelible mark in the world of storytelling.
I am going to continue this kind of work up to the last day of my life.
May I now request Shri Shekhar Kapoor, Festival Director, 55th IFFI, and also Srimati Shilpa Rao, Director Films, Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Government of India, to please join us on stage to felicitate our guests. We first present the bilingual brochure . Next we present the Saregama Karwa featuring the four legends. Next, the My Stamp issued by the Department of Posts, Government of India, featuring the four legends, Shri Tapan Sinha, Shri Raj Kapoor, Shri Akineni Nageswara Rao, and Shri Mohammad Rafi. And finally, we present the IFFI Memento.
That's a lot.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us with the felicitation. And now, over to Ms. Ratnottama Sengupta with a gracious request to commence the discussion.
$11:20, we've already eaten up quite a bit of into our 1 hour, but I assure you, you'll go back enriched. My Tapan Sinha, the name entered my consciousness. I think I was about 9. Atithi, based on Rabindranath Tagore's story, had been released. I watched it, and I was into cinema, I was entranced. 70s, 69, 70, whole lot of turmoil happening in Bengal. Apon John, Sagina Mahato, political statements, social statements. Another Tapan Sinha I become aware of. Later on, a film like Ek Doctor Ki Maut, I am by then interacting with the legend, and he tells me, he shares the pain of brain drain. Even later, before that, I've seen Adalato Ektime, and even later after that, Anturdhan about missing girls. His agony, his pain at the plight of women. I have not seen Nirjan Shoikote. I have not seen some of the others, but these two etched in my memory what Tapan Sinha was all about. So I'll start with Manu. I'll ask him to talk about Tapanda's social realism and briefly the political thoughts he shared or did not share with his other contemporaries.
In fact, personally, I would not separate the social and the political. And there is something very vitally important about Tapan Sinha. I will make references to Mrinal Sen, Satyajit Ray, and others, and possibly to some filmmakers outside of the Bengali cinematic tradition. But the other point is, whenever he moves into socio-political trajectories, the inner world of individuals is not lost sight of. So there is that inner world because it's always a relationship and at times a confrontation between the individual and history. This is very crucial. We saw a bit of the documentary by Sandeep Ray. Now, he says that a writer, an author, a filmmaker owes a lot to society, and intervention, creative intervention is not just creativity in isolation, but it's an intervention into historical processes. Now, that's why he describes himself as a very committed humanist. And we must locate his deep indebtedness to Tagore, to the Bengali writers. In fact, in a film like Upahar, he talks of Tagore and W.B. Yeats, the Irish-English poet. And the protagonist of Upahar, a professor, Ashok Sarkar, talks of a new identity, a new vision, a new society out of ideas, knowledge. This was Tapan Sinha's commitment to knowledge, and knowledge as indispensable to creativity. There's a very interesting anecdote. In fact, Satyajit Ray makes fun of Tapan Sinha. This is his allegiance to Tagore. He says, why did you have to use Tagore's songs and music in Kabuliwala? And Tapan Sinha says, I'm deeply indebted to him. At a later stage, Tapan Sinha turns back to Satyajit Ray and says, why did you do the same in Charulata? So they have a hearty laugh. Now, these were the exchanges that took place between masters, and this was the internalization of what I would call the Bengali Renaissance spirit of the writers. Upahar, quite dramatic, melodramatic, loved, but the ending of the film is absolutely important because there is a vision of a future, a vision that comes through knowledge. A vision that comes through knowledge that enables not just society in general, but Krishna, the female protagonist of the film, to look forward in spite of all the crushing forces on women. In fact, very sophisticated is Kanikir Atiti. You know, it's also about the problem of human relationships. Vimal, the doctor, Meeta, they want to get married, but again, in a very subtle, sophisticated manner, Tapan Sinha talks of the caste system. Now it's this Brahmanism, not loved, not ideological, but out of these experiential realities, the caste system is critiqued. But more important is, when they meet, there's always the possibility of coming together, but they cannot articulate, they cannot state it. So there is something that divides men and women, very sophisticated, very sensitive. So what am I trying to say? That even as he draws pictures of society, gets into politics, great creative artists never lose sight of the internal world, the internal struggles, the existential predicament of human beings. This is very central to Tapan Sinha's films. More sophisticated is Jatugraha. 1963, I'm not just trying to survey Tapan Sinha chronologically in a linear manner, but also through his thematic concerns. There are three contrasts in Jatugraha. One is Madhuri and Datta, very sophisticated, no abuse of each other, but there is something that divides. And also because she cannot bear a child, she has that guilt, her own guilt, and therefore there is one kind of a separation between man and woman. Not loud, very controlled, very sophisticated, but inseparable at one level, but they cannot live together. Contrast is the quarreling couple, fighting, shouting, but they endure. The third paradigm that appears in the film is of Supriyo. So look at the different contexts. He has children, happily married, and the pivotal point is the perspective of the film is, what does one say of a man-woman relationships? Is judgment possible at all? So even as you critique the problems human beings go through, especially a man and a woman, there's absolutely no judgment. So the internal world is beyond our social judgment. Can I continue?
No, I think we have to move on.
Just one film and I will stop,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
Sure.
Now, why I don't want a break is when you turn to Kshudishta Pashan, you know, in philosophical terms, you must understand the film, and I would say it's an attempt to deal with magical realism. Many of us, it's not about ghosts and spirits merely. It's about the man, the tax collector, the protagonist who comes so filled with empathy. So through the unreal, through the magical realism, the whole history of feudalism, patriarchy, the exploitation of women is constructed. Now, as it happens in the film The House of Spirits, featuring Meryl Streep, or as Gabriel Garcia Marquez does in 100 Years of Solitude. And therefore, how do we reconstruct the past, especially the feudal past, the oppression of women? So Tapan Sinha resorts to a different form. The form itself is different of what I would call magical realism. Very, very important, Kshudishta Pashan.
Thank you, Manu. Actually, a scholar like him, I'm sure he could have continued for the entire hour. But we have with us people like Sharmila, I'm going to save for the last, but Arjun, what you say is what nobody else can say, is about working with Tapan. Of course, Arjun is also. So, okay, Didi. I was about to ask Arjun, Tapan's female protagonists are, he stands out as a master artist who portrays the struggle, the agony, the pain of women as they had to fight and struggle and exist in a patriarchal society at least half a century ago. Arjun, of course, can also tell us about the music part of Tapan Sinha's film. So, which one would you choose?
Good morning, audience. And let me tell you one thing very frankly, that I can't be that elaborate and that analytical as Manu sir was, I'm just an actor, and I was born and raised in Rajasthan, came back to Mumbai and joined Mr. Gulzar as an assistant. And then somehow I came to Calcutta, Miralda took me, and I worked in 5 projects with Tapanda. Now Tapanda, whenever his name comes, Bengali language emerges. So if I may switch to into English and Hindi and Urdu, please don't mind, because I have to transcribe what he had said and what his exact opinion about himself and others. It was a rainy day, and my one Bengali film became super hit called Kodi Diye Kelna, and I had fever. And I was sitting in my veranda, and that time mobile was not there. Suddenly, that landline, it rang. And I picked the phone, and from other side, a voice, very sophisticated, very मुलायम जिसे कहते हैं रेशम की तरह, he said कि আমি কি অর্জুনের সঙ্গে কথা বলতে পারি? তো that tone made me think, you know, कि who must be this gentleman? I said कि আমি अर्जुन चक्रवर्ती बोलती, as if I am doing mimicry, मेरी आवाज़ भी वैसी हो गई कि আমি अर्जुन चक्रवर्ती बोलছি। बोले अर्जुन, you I am Tapan Sinha, I am director. Bengali te, কিন্তু আমি translate করেছি। I am a director. তো আমি, yes, Dada, I know them. But do you have time? Don't go out of your way. You have time. আমার বয়স হচ্ছে, I am getting old. That's why I would have come to your house. তোমার জন্য একটা রোল ভেবেছি। I have seen your Kodi Diye Kelna, and you're very cinematic. So can you come down to my house? I took out the car. I didn't wait for the driver. I said, forget about the Bukhar and all. And I straight went. Now, you know, if you go to somebody's place, वो क्या कहते हैं? कैसे हो? आने में कोई तकलीफ तो नहीं हुई? क्या पियोगे? No, he was standing दो तला second floor है. And I said, नमस्कार दादा. बोले, listen Arjun, I have a Jatha Moshai. He was very handsome and he was very erudite and edified, very educated, but when he died, 4 आदमी नहीं मिले कंधा देने के लिए. He was so nirmam, he was so heartless. I'm going to give that role to you. He injected that role in me. Then he took me upstairs and he said, cha khabe na coffee khabe, ki khabe tumi? And you know, दोपहर का वक्त था. He said, white rum खाबे जो शीतकाले? I said, no, अभी cha खाओ. That sophisticated he was, and then he narrated the entire story. I still remember the Kaluda, Shomindu Roy, the cameraman. He said, "Ki Tapanda, why did you choose Arjun for this role? I mean, he's anti-hero, all right, but he is very heartless and he's very dangerous kind of a. He's like a Satan." So he said, Bengali में अपना सबाई बुझते पारबेन, शयतान always সুন্দর হয়. That's why they can get into the society. एक बहुत ही खूबसूरत सा आदमी आपके घर के सामने कहे कि माशिमा या काकीमा या आंटी या अंकल बहुत प्यास लगी है, थोड़ा पानी मिलेगा? You fall for it. And you let him enter. Now the problem enters. So that's why he was not taciturn or reticent. He would love to speak. And to me, I think he would identify his childhood with mine, because I am from Rajasthan, he was from Bhagalpur. So you always do, you know, talk about those bachpan ka thing, कि कैसे खेलते थे, कैसे ये करते थे.
Probashi Bangali.
Probashi, I was Probashi Bangali and he was also Probashi Bangali. So that's how I will not waste your time much. Time to time, if I get chance, I'll again speak about Tapanda, but I would love to. Nirjan Shoikote. Now my first interaction with cinema was her. I was assistant to Mr. Gulzar when we were shooting Namkeen, and she was the heroine. So from that I asked Nirjan, after seeing Nirjan Shoikote, Tapanda, how did you narrate this story to a producer? Because you can't narrate Nirjan Shoikote 5টা বিধবার কে নিয়ে গল্প. 5 or 4. Yeah. 4 widows. It's story over 4 widows and 1 lady, young lady. क्या करोगे, कैसे सुनाओगे प्रोड्यूसर को? He was very वही रेशम वाली आवाज बोले कि আমার প্রডিউসারের জন্য যেতে হয় না কাউকে কোথাও, they come to me and they say ki you Tabanda make film, we are there. So that's how he was. Rikudi, your thing.
It's on Karachi.
Where do I begin? I think my first meeting with Tapan Babu was when I was 11 years old, because he was making Kabuliwala, and my sister Tinku played Minnie, and that's when I had the opportunity to see him, and I called him Tapun Kaku, as in Nankal. Kaka is your father's younger brother. So, and I found him so, you said he was not reticent, and he was, but he was a man of few words. He had a presence, of course. Like when he entered, because he was very fair, I would say good looking, and there was a kind of spark that exuded from him, like of culture, of education, of knowing. Like a lot of people keep quiet because they don't know anything, and you sense they have nothing to say. But when you met Tapan Babu, you realized he has a lot to say, but he didn't want to, or he didn't need to, because he was a very good listener. I think that is such an important thing, because I've been to many get-togethers where I see that people, like if I stop, everybody's talking, and they're waiting for their turn to talk. In the process, they're not really hearing anything, and when you don't hear anything, you're not learning much also. So he was a great listener, and that's how I remember him. And on set, when I saw him directing my sister, Tinku, she was just 5 years old. And what a performance in the film. I don't know how many of you seen the
She's
Bengali
such a darling.
Kabuliwala.
I mean, just being there in that.
Bengali Kabuliwala, all her innocence and all her pranks, all her, that kind of naughtiness that a child has, all that is there. And she was behaving like that on the set also. But everybody was so patient. One day she says, I'm not going to work unless I get Chinese food. So then Chinese food was brought. Then another day she says, if there's no lipstick on my teeth, then I'm not going to talk. So then lipstick was brought. So all her whims and all that was, so he managed to get, otherwise it was quite easy to put off a child. So I saw his patience. He was a very patient, he was an observer, he was a listener, he was also very patient, and also allowed things to flow. And that is why he got such wonderful performances out of people. And then, of course, I worked in Nijam Shrikote, and we had this, as you said, that how do you narrate the story of Nijam Shrikote? It is something that I agree with you, Arjun. You cannot really tell the story. What is it about? First, the scene opens in a very crowded Howrah station. And one glimpse of that scene tells you where we are. It's full of people, and everybody is wearing a different kind of attire. So this is a Parsi, this is a Muslim, this is a Hindu, this is a priest, this is a businessman. So at one glance, you know that this is such a mixture of many identities and many people from various corners of And then there is a little very interesting shot where in a very smart coupe, there is a foreign couple, white couple. So that is also shown because at that point of time, Kolkata was the financial capital of India. So there was lots of boxwalas that later one has talked about in other films of raid. And just to digress a little bit from Nirjan Shirkate, when you say Jyotugriho, it's a beautiful film, sort of looking at the complexities. But at that year, Charulata was released. So this film was completely overshadowed. And that's happened to, sorry I'm digressing, I'm coming back to Nirjan Shirkate, but it's happened to Tapan Sinha many times. Because he came at a time when these three other giants reigned. Satyajit Ray, Mrinal Sen, Hrithik Ghatak. If you do a Google search, you'll find, I don't know, 40 books on Satyajit Ray, about 30 odd books on Mrinal Sen, and then for Tapan Sinha you'll find one English book at the last search that I did, and 4 Bengali
His
books.
autobiography is priceless.
His autobiography. So, you know, there is so much less publication on him. And I think that also, I think the reason being, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean you are here, so you will correct me, that it was the film society at that time, which was peopled by very, for want of a better word, had a very kind of intellectual outlook towards everything.
Atil would be a better word.
Well, arty and kind of taking their cue from the international, all sort of references, etc. So somehow Tapan Sinha was a little away from it, despite his, as you said, the language of his cinema, the words, because he also made films out of published works, like Tarashankar Bandyopadhyay's Hashuli Bake Rupakatha, then Jyotugriho was
made
also...
40 films,
Yes.
30 of them are all by
Yes, Nirjan Shirkate was also Shaganesh Basu.
Yes.
So that kind of a literary, not literary in a cinema, I mean it's cinematic, but that kind of...
content-oriented.
Yes, it was, and no, what you heard was so lovely, so not lyric, but was so apt and so it's sort of expressive. In Nirjan Shirkate, there is a character of Pahari Shannal. So let me start. We started at the Howrah station. Then the camera goes into a very, very crowded coupe. And you see one man is somehow fighting the crowd and trying to get in. And he's carrying a bird cage, an empty bird cage. Now who's this man? And he remains a kind of enigma throughout the film. He's a traveler, running away from somewhere or going towards something, we don't know. He's in search of something. But he's carrying that cage with him, which is empty. Now you can look at it from any way you want, that it's an empty cage, but it has baggage in it. Is he running away from that? It's up to you to decide. And then he gets into and somehow finds a place, and then there is these widows that we meet. And then later on we see the widows. There's one scene where Molina Devi is putting on makeup on her face before she goes to sleep. So everybody's saying, why are you getting ready now? She says, well, you know, because they're on a holiday, but at home they won't be allowed to do makeup or put on anything
social reality
because of the status of widows. So here they are feeling free in front of a eternal sea, so to speak, and they're letting themselves go. And there's a beautiful bathing scene where they, have so much fun. And that is a really talked about scene in the film. So in many ways, Nijun Shoikote was a very progressive, and talking about Robindra Sangeet, Shuko Tara Aakhi Meli Chai, Dakho Dakho. It's in a picnic scene. So, how much, I don't know whether you're familiar with Bengali cinema, whether you're familiar with Nijun Shoikote. I really don't want to talk at you. Perhaps you can ask us questions later, we can answer. But depends on your interest in, because as I said, somehow, correct me if I'm wrong, that because of these other luminaries then, Tapan Sinha was not really looked at properly, and also the fact that he brought Vaijayanti Mala and Ashok Kumar to work in Bengal, in Hate Hate Bajare. Then he brought Dilip Kumar and Saira Banu to work in Sagina Mahato. And then Dilip Kumar insisted that they make it in Hindi, which was not a great idea because that didn't work. Because language is something, but whatever. And this Bengal being attached, understanding who Sagina Mahato, all about him. So that didn't work in. So he did took lots of steps. And as you said about Dr. Kimot, was such a wonderful film. And I think that was recognized. I think he got an award for it. Critics Award, and Pankaj Kapoor got also. He was perturbed.
I think one of the things about him was, at that point of time, I think somehow the divide between serious cinema and popular cinema, I'm not going to use the
very stark,
was very stark. And he kind of bridged. I have been going through the history of cinema, and I realized that he had started with new theatres and with Bimal Roy. He was a sound recordist first, and he always maintained that cinema is a medium of art, but for the absolute common viewer. And he was never talking down to the audience, and audiences loved his films. So somewhere people thought that he's popular cinema and not to be taken
because his
seriously.
films did well at the box office.
Yes.
So that's why it was a popular cinema.
Yeah.
Because, but it was not. I mean, it was like the kind of OTT films. Now we are talking about the so-called, it's the difference between a popular cinema, a commercial cinema, and art cinema is blurring now.
Absolutely.
And then OTT platform, you see so much of
Yes.
mixture of all. So I think Tapan Sinha's films were like that.
Absolutely.
They were
He
very
bridged.
pleasing. It was dealing with difficult subjects. It was a socio-political comment also, and yet it had some kind of. The language was easy for people to understand. Yes. It was not made difficult just to be difficult.
Endearing, very endearing approach to filmmaking
and also,
characters.
I just want to talk about Pahari Sharnal's character in Nijun Shoikote. I talked about Anil's character, but here's a man who lives in splendor in a very faraway place, surrounded with luxurious objects and lots of women, and there's beautiful Odissi dancing, by a very well-known dancer. So all that is there. And then when asked, he says, I left lot of people leave their home for sannyas. But I've left my home to enjoy my life. The word he uses is bhog kar Arjun. So bhog is not quite entertainment.
Absorb, so to say,
more
to soak
in
in.
more a sensual kind of way that I want to see the world. So there are different characters beginning from the Howrah station in the film, the different characters, that Ruby Ghosh's character, who's a panda, and his wife, remember, after the train takes off, and Anil Chatterjee wants to use the washroom, and he's going towards the washroom, he jumps out and says, no, 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 and he opens the door, and out comes a woman with a ghungat, because she was traveling ticket-free, so, without ticket. So all those little elements are just strewn across, and then you get it or not get it, but it enriches the film.
Absolutely. She's already talked about the pinja, the bird cage. Empty, but a burden. So in Jatugriha also, these are little things that at that point of time people didn't really absorb. In Jatugriha, that these two have parted. They had separated, they had divorced, and they come together in a waiting hall. There's a hope that they might come together, but actually they go away in different directions. And they are in this waiting hall. This man, he picks up the cups, washes them, and puts them up into different sides, and still they are a pair. The two cups are a pair. So these kind of little subtle touches, which at that point of time probably a lot of people missed, critics I mean, or were more occupied with other, very blatant expression. But one thing I am going to share with all of you. My father was at that point of time, my father was an eminent screenwriter, and he was a guest lecturer at FDI. So there, to teach the students, he had audio recorded the entire dialogue and music of Khudito Pasha. And he was playing at home, and I was just out of school or maybe still in school, and he was playing repeatedly, and I was drawn into it. It's kind of haunts you, that use of Ali Akbar Khan's Sharod. And we always talk about Pather Pachali and Panditji's the segments of music in Pather Pachali, which also haunts. But Khudito Pasha, if you just forget everything else, forget the visuals, forget the acting, performance, everything, just listen to the music, it transports you. And Tapan Sinha did it repeatedly. With this Hati Bajare, there was a song which was played. It's a folk song. In Saginama to Jiri Jiri Chora Tiri Tiri Nache. I think Arjun can give us a little demonstration.
Excuse me. Excuse me, sir.
He's a very, very good.
Hello, sir. Excuse me. I'm from Bangalore, but I don't know. There are three photos of you all, but Tapan Babu का photo ही नहीं है. You don't imagine.
No, इससे पहले वो documentary दिखाई थी ना तपन दा की.
अच्छा, I came little late.
हाँ, documentary दिखाई तपन दा की. And every very good looking, and every next sentence we are pronouncing his name. Tapanda, Tapanda.
But he wants the picture of him.
Tapanda loved one song, his personal liking, रविंद्र संगीत. तो मैं 4 लाइन गा के सुना के उसके बाद अगर मुझे मौका मिलेगा तो मैं 2-4 बात और करूँगा.
To me, acting now, because we have to take questions after that. I know.
সারা পথের ক্লান্তি আমার, সারা দিনের তৃষা কেমন করে মেটাবো যে খুঁজে না পাই দিশা. এ আধার যে পূর্ণ তোমায় সেই কথা বলিও মাঝে মাঝে প্রাণে তোমার পরশখানি দিও শুধু তোমার বাণী নয় গো হে বন্ধু হে প্রিয়।
Lovely. We will continue. I mean, there's so much to Tapan, honestly. I mean, for 50 years, he spanned the screen, not only in Bengal, but he made films in Hindi, he made film in Oriya, and most importantly, I must, before we go on to other questions, Gulzar Saab, we've referred to him so many times. Gulzar Saab, on a national level, established his signature with Mere Apne, which came out of Apunjan. Then Rishikesh Mukherjee, we were talking about the kind of film that Tapan Sinha made. Eventually that came to be recognized as the middle of the stream cinema. Rishikesh Mukherjee, Gulzar, they continued. Rishikesh Mukherjee reconstructed, whatever, recreated. Bawarchi came out of Golpo Holeo Shakti, and Ijazat Gulzar came out of, the seed came out of Jyotugriho. Rishikesh Mukherjee made also Arjun Pandit. Arjun Pandit came out of...
Haribhai got the national award for it.
Right, right. And so what I'm trying to say is other major filmmakers...
Also
Lekin, Khuditu Pashan, yeah, inspired by... Actually, I mentioned Bimal Roy earlier. You see, there are so many resonances. Madhumati and Khuditu Pashan, a couple of years apart, but so different, and yet the spirit. What I'm repeatedly coming to is at that point of time, for them, it was not important to make an intellectual comment or an intellectual expression in cinema. They were making films for everybody, but the roots were in their contemporary society, contemporary times, and contemporary
and that's why
arts and literature.
A lot of Bollywood, as they call it now, but a lot of Hindi cinema, including, as you said, Gulzar Saab, Rishikesh Mukherjee, adapted his work.
Absolutely.
In Hindi,
and seamlessly.
Well appreciated.
Yes.
And then this Bawarchi, he took Rajesh Khanna.
Right.
But whereas the original film was Robi Ghosh.
Robi Ghosh.
And Robi Ghosh and Khan. So that was even more, real.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
Robi Ghosh as the cook.
It was very acceptable.
He was
And
very
another
good.
film, I always feel, towards his later life, Shahjano Bagan was a play, and he used Manoj Mitro, the same writer and the same actor. Bancharame Bagan. It became Bancharame Bagan, which is delightful, it's a breakaway comedy. And it's again a statement about the minute you have something to live for, you don't die.
And children's film?
Children's film, that's another
Also very
genre.
happy, yes.
That, he kind of like a colossus, and he repeatedly goes back to it. After 2 or 3 very serious film, Shatabdir Konna was a number of short films, Daughters of the Century. How a century had passed by, we had entered Y2K, and yet attitudes towards women had not really changed. And then he goes back again to Anmol Moti and these films. Anokha Moti, I'm so sorry. I stand corrected. We will take questions, but please stand up, introduce yourself. I'm sure they have mics, and ask questions. Don't launch into very long discussions. And please say who you are directing your questions to. Yes, please have a second mic ready on this side.
Hello, I'm Amlan Kusum Ghosh from Kolkata, a filmmaker turned journalist, filmmaker. My question is to Manu. After so much of achievements, why Tapan Sinha was so underrated in his time? Do you feel that it is largely because of too much of focus on race?
I think we've all attempted to answer that, address that. But
only 3 years ago was Ray's centenary.
yeah.
So compared to that, today's.
You know, my answer is it's the absolute failure of critics. And I will give you 3 examples. Critics. See, turn to a film made in 1958. Lauha Kapat, The Iron Walls, Prison Story. Shantaram had already made Do Anke Barahat. But if you do a good analysis of the film, behind Lauha Kapat, Malai Chowdhury, okay? Empathy, it comes from Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, and it comes from Orwell. You can read them as stories or as essays, Shooting an Elephant and a Hanging. How does one look at crime? And Sharat Chandra Babu is invoked there. Is there any human being without any remorse, any qualities of redemption that prevent him from seeking redemption? Because no human being, this is Sharat Chandra Babu's line, no human being is so incorrigible that there can't be redemption. This is one. Has anybody talked about these things? And I will mention 2 films, and I would like not to be stopped. There is something very prophetic, visionary. Sagina Mahato. You know, nobody has made a film like that in the sense that this is about tribal struggles, colonial period, and this is about the emergence of the revolutionary party, which is ideological. And ideology is so important that people don't matter for the revolutionary party. That's why if you look at Aparna Sen, she protests. So this is the dominance of Michael Polanyi, the great Hungarian philosopher, wrote an essay on the message of the Hungarian Revolution. This is Stalinism in the making, something very brilliantly prophetic in the film. Sagina Mahato, whatever may be the overshadowing performances of Dilip Kumar and others, to say this is the future of Bengali politics, that the party will become so important, whether it's the Congress or the CPM, it just doesn't matter. It's the party that becomes important, and when the tribals fight for a decentralized, democratic fight against the colonial masters, the party suppresses them. If you look at that, Sagina is manipulated by the revolutionary party. You know, this was the time when the great Oriya writer Gopinath Mohanty wrote the novel Paraja. And you will also see that this is where you will begin to notice that these are intellectual dimensions, profound intellectual dimensions. Nobody has talked about it. Follow it up with what I think is a very important connection to Sagina Mahato, Atanka. It's about, and of course brilliantly portrayed by Soumitra Chatterjee, it's about, the line comes there. There is no federalism, there is no socialism, there is no democracy, but there is only hooliganism. And you know, if you turn to Satyajit Ray, traces of it in Pratidwandi, but if you turn to Mrinal Sen, Calcutta 71, interview, Padatik, they're exploring the collapse of the communist movement. Turn to Adur Gopalakrishnan, who did that in Mukhamukam, who did that in Kathapurushan, and the East European filmmakers, to mention Belatar from Hungary or Andre Vaida. Now, there is something so brilliantly intellectual about it. This has not been projected. And here is a man who talks of Tagore, talks of W.B. Yeats, talks of Sharitra Chandra Babu, and of course the towering figure of the great man, Ishwara Chandra Vidyasagar. And therefore, where are these gone? Apanjan, of course, it was pointed out that Gulzar later made Mere Apne with Meena Kumari. But look at this. This old woman, a widow, has a sense of history. Such a sense of history, and this is the vision of the whole text, that there can be a different future. And who does she remember? She remembers Deshabandhu Chittaranjan Das, C.R. Das. Now these are the models that Tapan Sinha was working with. Whatever you may say of being popular, this being a hit, I don't care. But as somebody who has spent 40 years watching cinema and teaching literature, reading literature, I see great intellectual dimensions in Tapan Sinha. And this panel, I think, is bringing it, is foregrounding all these things, magnificent. Sagina Mahato to talk of the party becoming more important than the people, and Atanka saying, collapse. This is colonial India, Sagina Mahato. This is post-independent democratic with your democratic republic, collapsed. Are these not great intellectual positions? But underlying all these is a very great humanist ethical position. And this is what we must recognize. And just one word about Adalat Okti May. Again, a very intellectual dimension, Tanuja there. And look at how she overcomes. It's the coming into being of a woman, and the father figure stands by her. And when he goes to the office, he says, my raped daughter is well. Law, society, woman, and let's not forget Vijay Tendulkar writing a play like this on different lines, Shantata Kor Chalu Ahe. The woman at the center, your judicial system fails, your legal system fails, your society, of course, women are there to be hammered left and right. And here is a man who says, look at these women who stand up and fight. Now, I think these are great intellectual dimensions.
Yes.
And of course, Ek Doctor Ki Maut, I will just take half a minute. Ek Doctor Ki Maut, the sense of history, you can read it as the history of science, the philosophy of science, because there is this teacher, Deepankar Roy is a teacher, who says, I will offer myself for the experiment, and invokes J.B.S. Haldane, the great man J.B.S. Haldane, trying to offer himself as an experiment for test leprosy and the establishment. This is the sense of history, the sense of history of science, philosophy of science, magnificent intellectual dimensions. The man Tapan Sinha knew all these.
Tapan Sinha repeatedly went back to medical science and issues. Hatebajare is the social side of it. Another very important political comment that escapes us, Ajje Chilo Desh, where an experiment in the lab creates a medicine or whatever we call it, injection, whereby people start speaking the truth, and creates a war because the political leaders cannot have the truth. So he repeatedly goes into that and does it so subtly, and every time it's a different flavor, a different experience. Yes, please, you people with the mic, इन लोगों के पास हाँ पहुंच जाएंगे जरा.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
I am Dr. Manu Sharma. I am a film historian and also a professor at JNU Delhi. And my question is to Manu sir. And my question is that how you can in a way see the reasons or the way you can see that the socio-political approach of Tapanda, how it in a way reconciles with the commercial aspects of filmmaking, as I think it was being discussed also. Thank you.
No, I think I'm sure you have watched all these films. He works on the popular mode, not the commercial mode, which means he's more inclusive. If you turn to Satyajit Ray, in fact, Mrinal Sen is closer. Satyajit Ray is very sophisticated. Tapan Sinha, in that sense, is not sophisticated in craftsmanship, but it does not make him a lesser filmmaker. All that I'm trying to say is he was inclusive. And his inclusivity came from his belief that art need not be elitist. But then to understand him, you need to have that elite consciousness. What I mean by elite consciousness is destroy these social distinctions between the unpad, the illiterate and literate. no film of his. I would like you to cite a film which the common people cannot understand. So common people, as if there are uncommon people and common people. The point is, these have not been foregrounded, and the time has come. Not too late, because I believe in the kind of optimism that Tapan Sinha had, that if you construct it intellectually, whatever may be said, there is that intellectual trajectory, strong intellectual trajectory built on the edifice of an ethical consciousness.
Before we go on to the next and probably the last, because I am constantly being reminded that the clock is ticking away, I have to say one thing. You know, he was a great supporter. I mean, like, this festival is giving a new focus to debut directors. And I remember something he had mentioned. Nabendu Ghosh, my father, got the best debut director when he was 72. And Tapan Sinha was the jury chairperson, and he had said that this is one example that debut, the word debut we normally think is only young people, and so, you know, like young blood and young thought. But at this age, at the age of 72, the philosophy. So debut means bringing in a fresh approach or a fresh thought, and he repeatedly did that with actors. You know, I mean, why I took this little 1 minute is, if you just look at the spectrum of people who have acted under, and he's brought them, you know, so many of them have been debut directors. I am taking time to underscore this, because it is often overlooked. We always think of people who've been introduced by either Ray or Mrinalna, but Tapan Sinha, seniors, so many senior artists, like Chhaya Devi, you know, I mean, like, an artist like her, he sort of suddenly made us sit up and take note that, you know, like, one doesn't have to be star. Right, she sang the songs, and she was actually a very good singer, trained singer. And she was a cousin of Ashok Kumar, and that whole family has this music in their genes, I think.
Just a second. In this house, I want it
So
to
you
be
can
recorded.
see we have not exhausted ourselves either.
I want it to be recorded that such was his commitment that in 1958 he made Kalamati on the coal workers, coal mining, which 2 years ago, a filmmaker I admire so much, Debashish Makija, made Joram. So it's still not settled. The collapse of the working class, of the trade union movement, 1958 Kalamati.
Okay, so one more, and I think that will be the last question.
Yeah, I'm Ujjwala Sinha here. I'm an acting by profession with a great cinema lover. I'm a Bengali. I grew up in Kolkata, and I just grew up seeing Tapan Sinha's movies. And Choti Si Panchi was to be played in my house like a national anthem. The movies like Adalat Ki, Adalat Ekti Mein, Va Ek Doctor Ki Maut, Ki Hate Bajare, these movies influenced our generations a lot, and it had a socio-political and impact also. My other question is, being a Pravashi Bengali now for a long time, we see there is a political and socio restlessness which is happening in Bengal. And is it because of the movies of like this, of Tapan Sinha's movies, Gautuk's movies, are not getting made? Or those impact is not? There's a general question to all of you. Because which we feel as being out of Bengal for 15 to 20 years.
No, can you just
the question.
Recast it in a sentence as an interrogative sentence?
Yeah, my question is, these movies had a great influence in our generations. But being outside Bengal, we find at present, there is a restlessness, which we can see in the media. So, is this because of these movies are not getting made anymore?
There is a vacuum in the kind of, in the space that Tapan Sinha occupied. Yes. Is that influencing the social?
I wish we had greater restlessness all over the country to bring down tyranny, authoritarianism. Turning to Madam Renu in Nirjan Saikate, you know what? He says it's a writer at the center.
Yes.
The writer talking of widows, the four widows, and telling this young girl, Renu, vulnerability is important.
Yes.
Even if you are betrayed, even if you have gone through treachery, have faith, I hope, and it's your vulnerability, spiritual vulnerability, that's going to shape your evolution as a human being.
And also,
I wish we had more such things.
at the end also, when he's gone, and you don't know what the end is, but she is following in his footsteps.
And the deserted sands.
The deserted sand, and because he has been in that Konark scene, has been able to influence and get through to her, to that feeling sorry for herself or feeling cheated. So he's shown her the way forward. So
vulnerability is her strength.
yes, and now she has the strength, despite the vulnerability. Now she has, she's been inspired by him and his thoughts to follow him forward. And also, with due respect, films are being made, but probably not where you can see, but if you are really interested, you can see where they are screened and you can watch those films. Maybe not in commercial theatres, but in many theatres, and there are many ways of putting it out there, and you'll be able to see that certain films are still being made. There's Anand Patwardhan, there are many others. So if you're really interested, you'll be able to see those films.
Thank you so much, ma'am. On that note, can we please thank our esteemed panel for giving us your valuable time and this insightful session honoring the legend Sri Tapan Sinha. Can you please have a big round of applause for our celebrated speakers? We would also like to thank you, lovely audience, for being with us. We hope you had a lot to gain from this session. We surely want to see you for the next one, which is going to begin shortly. With this, we conclude this session. Thank you and have a great day.